You're now listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.
Hello, Rockies. This is Sarah Jane Maroney, your host. And today we are speaking with Michael Allen, the DA for Colorado Springs. He's a Colorado native and chose to serve his country after graduating from Arvada West High School. He enlisted in the Navy and served as an aviation electronics technician until he was honorably discharged in 1998. In the years following his military service, Michael earned his undergraduate degree from the University of Northern Colorado, his law degree from the University of Kansas, and resolved to continue serving public interest. He began interning with the Johnson County, Kansas District Attorney's Office before accepting a position with that office as a prosecutor. Next, he served as a prosecutor for the Kansas Attorney General's Office before moving over to the Douglas County, Kansas District Attorney's Office. In 2015 and 2017, Michael Allen was named Homicide Prosecutor of the Year in the 4th Judicial District. Michael was sworn in as the elected district attorney for Colorado's 4th Judicial District on the 12th of January in 2021. In 2024, he received the Patriot Award from the U.S. Secretary of Defense for his support of the Guard and Reserve at the 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office. He resides with his wife Heidi in Monument, and we welcome him. Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's always fun.
Well, and the last time that you were here, you and Jarvis spoke about a lot of ballot initiatives from the last legislative session. Could you just kind of highlight those? Because I think they all passed, correct?
Yeah, they did all pass. The heartening thing that I get from the ballot initiative process from this last election cycle is that Coloradans still care about public safety, and that's really what they showed by supporting law enforcement, by requiring truth in sentencing for some really high-level crimes. Those are the two big things that I was really following and helping push the narrative on. And so when we put these things to a vote to the people of Colorado, so just everyday regular Coloradans who care about public safety, they're supporting these things in a really positive way. And that's in stark contrast to what's happening in the legislature, where we keep seeing this criminal justice reform effort from primarily the party in control of the state legislature and then the governor's office, really pushing, weakening our public safety stance as opposed to strengthening it, which seems to me to be counter to what the people of Colorado want.
So in terms of the DA's office, maybe I could ask you a little bit of background coming to this fairly innocently of, I don't know how this works. You see things on TV like, the ADAs, and what does that look like? And why would a DA even be, quote unquote, elected?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if there are DAs in other states that are not elected. Maybe Florida may be one that I can think of where there are state's attorneys as opposed to district attorneys. But essentially in Colorado, we're constitutionally created. So DAs were created at the start of this state back in 1876. So when we think about it that way, it makes sense. The one thing that people get most surprised by is they think because we're listed in the state constitution under the judicial branch that we are part of the judicial branch of government, and we're not. We're executive branch. So we are enforcing the laws just like police and sheriff's offices. So we're executive branch function. We are the chief law enforcement officer for each of the judicial districts. So for me, I'm elected in the 4th Judicial District, representing both El Paso and Teller counties. So anything that happens in the criminal justice system in this district has to flow through this office and is prosecuted under my authority as an elected official. So that's what we mean when we say, that we're the chief law enforcement officer for an area. That, we work close hand in hand with our law enforcement partners, but if we decide that there's not enough evidence to prosecute a case, then we just refuse to go forward on it. And there's no other way to do a prosecution if they can't get us on board with that. Luckily, we have really good partnerships with law enforcement here in my district, and we've got really good professional law enforcement agencies, so we get really, for the most part, really good cases that we can move forward on. But again, it's the oversight of our office on that process that makes us that sort of top law enforcement office and official in the area.
And so you do have ADAs, or do you?
Yeah. So one thing that's interesting is state statute actually sort of sets out what we can have as far as the top level positions. So obviously the DA is elected, and then the by statute, we get one assistant DA. So that would be the most highest ranked non-elected position in the office, is who a DA selects to be the assistant DA. And by statute, you get one per office. Some places across the state have decided that if they rename a position slightly different, then they aren't in violation of statute, but essentially they create this ability to have two assistant DAs. I don't really think that's necessary to have that sort of division of that labor. And then below that, we have chief deputy DAs. We've got 4 in this office, and then a bunch of other people that fall down below that. And then, interestingly enough, at least for me, is that when you look at the size of this office, the 4th Judicial District DA's office, compared to other collections of attorneys in Southern Colorado, we have the most attorneys. So I call us the biggest law firm in Southern Colorado. And that's basically from Douglas County south and then extending east and west across the whole state. We've got 93 total attorney positions, which is a lot of attorneys, obviously. And there's probably some good attorney jokes in there too.
And so that means that you're working with the Teller County Sheriff, the El Paso County Sheriff, CSPD, and Woodland Park as well.
Yeah, so we actually work with roughly 23 other law enforcement agencies. It'd be, like you just said, those 2 sheriff's offices, and then all the smaller municipal police departments, so Monument Police, Palmer Lake, those places, Green Mountain Falls Marshal's Office, Woodland Park, Cripple Creek. And then we also work closely with our federal partners too. They do a lot of investigative help on state cases. And so when they are working on a state case, they'll give us their case reports, and they're part of the prosecution effort in that way as well. So typically we're working with about 23 local agencies that work on criminal justice here in the 4th Judicial.
And this is your second term as DA, I believe. And is that term limited?
Yeah, so I'm really blessed to have the opportunity to serve for a second time as the elected DA. In Colorado, areas of the state can opt out of term limits. So, for instance, my neighbor to the south, the DA down in Pueblo, they don't have term limits down there. So they can serve until they decide to retire or the voters decide they want to go a different direction. Here in the 4th Judicial District, we have 3 term limits. So I could do a total of 12 years if I opt to do that, and the voters select me for it. And yeah, just starting into my second term now, and just happy to be in this position.
So moving on a little bit further afield, the state legislature has remained in Democratic control. However, we've had a switch in terms of the control from Democratic to Republican. And there's often quite a bit of conflict there. And there's a lot of bills that relate to law and order coming out of the legislature. Did you want to speak to anyone in particular? I know SB 3 is obviously a big one.
Yeah. So it is an interesting dynamic in that, our state government, so, the state legislature, attorney general, secretary of state, governor's office, treasurer, all the statewide elected positions are all in control of the Democrats. So that would include our senators too. The 2 senators that we have in the U.S. Senate are both Democrat. We've been that way. The last statewide elected official was actually Senator Cory Gardner, and that was, I think, 4 years ago when he lost to former Governor Hickenlooper. And so we haven't had a statewide elected official since then, and we've really struggled to get some footing there for a lot of different issues. I think we can do better there and get some balance back in the state. And that's really what I think we need in Colorado, is that balance. We've got to start getting some inroads into eroding total control of state government from one side over the other. It's led to bad policy. It's led to really bad things in criminal justice over the last several years. I think Jarvis and I talked about some of those things the last time I was on. But, when we look at decriminalization efforts, we've had lots of that over time. Murder has been decriminalized to an extent. And some people don't understand what decriminalization means. They think it means taking away all criminal punishment for whatever the act might be, but it can also mean reducing the punishment for different offenses. So when I talk about decriminalization of murder, we used to obviously have the death penalty in Colorado. That's been abolished by state statute, by action from the legislature and the governor. The levels of felony murder used to be a class 1 felony. Now it's a class 2 felony. So it's a reduction from the top level down one notch. So again, decriminalization effort. There's an effort underway currently to lower attempted extreme indifference murder from a class 2 felony down to a class 5 felony under certain circumstances. So going from a class 2 felony, which is the second highest level, down to a class 5, that's the second lowest level. So a class 2 felony is punishable by 16 years to 48 years mandatory in prison, somewhere in that range. The judge would have discretion. If this bill that's being considered now is passed, it would drop it to a class 5 felony, which is 2 years to 8 years and probation eligibility for attempted extreme indifference murder. And most people don't know what that means. That's obviously a legal phrase. But essentially, the best way to think about what extreme indifference murder is think of a mass shooting event where, the Aurora Theater shooting or the King Soopers in Boulder, the shooting where the shooter goes in intending to kill as many people as possible. That's showing a malice towards the value of human life, just trying to commit as many murders as you can in one fell swoop and not really targeting a specific person. So that's what extreme indifference murder is. Attempted extreme indifference murder is doing all those things except you don't actually kill somebody. So for instance, in the Aurora Theater shooting case, all the people that were in the theater that weren't killed, they're victims of attempted extreme indifference murder. Same for Club Q. And so the legislature, in their infinite wisdom, has decided that they want to say that if somebody's not killed and they're not injured, even though they were shot at and the intention was to kill them, that the value of their victimhood is probation potentially. That's just a disgusting thing to me. And so the DAs have all pushed back on that, and we'll see what ends up happening with it. But again, that's another sign of the legislature really decriminalizing really heinous acts from people. And then obviously the decriminalization of drugs in Colorado, we've created now, when I say we, I don't mean DAs or me specifically, I'm talking about the royal we, right? The state through our legislature has really created a permissive drug culture in Colorado. It's causing, really dangerous drugs to be reduced from potentially prison sentences for distribution down to probation. We've seen that with fentanyl, where we had to fight really hard to reverse that a little bit, and it's still not where it needs to be. But when we're talking about decriminalizing fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, crack, heroin, all these really dangerous, highly addictive drugs that kill people, the legislature has thought that we need to go to the idea of harm reduction, meaning that these people that are dealing these drugs, we shouldn't hold them accountable in a prison. We should get them counseling and get them help through human services to get off of distribution. And that just isn't reflecting reality. And then when we see what happened with fentanyl, obviously, it really shows the misguided nature of the legislature to decriminalize these things. And it's really causing problems. And it's led to lots of people dying, kids, adults, what have you. And the overdose deaths for fentanyl, for instance, really know no bounds. It's not a minority thing. It's not a poor thing. We've had people all over the spectrum, a socioeconomic spectrum, that have died from this stuff. So really, the legislature has done a real disservice to the state of Colorado when we talk about those types of things.
So a final question. If you are frustrated by the legislature and what has essentially hampered you in terms of your job, what would you say to citizens who still want to be involved, who still believe in law and order, those that agree with you and did elect you? What would you say to them to encourage them in terms of their viewpoint?
Yeah, the biggest thing I think is that people are so distracted. Everybody's busy. Life is more chaotic now than it seems like it's ever been. And so it's hard to pay attention to everything that's happening, but figure out a way to engage on things, figure out a way to stay up to date on what bills are being passed, who's running for office, what their record is, and then really voicing either your pleasure or displeasure in an elected official by actually going and voting. And ask other elected officials that you trust, who's doing a good job in the legislature, who's not, who do we need to start focusing our efforts on replacing, finding good candidates to replace them, and really start to have the legislature reflect what I talked about at the beginning, and that is Coloradans care about public safety. And it doesn't matter what demographic you come from. People in poor areas, they want their neighborhoods to be safe. People in richer areas, they want their neighborhoods to be safe too. And when we see these ballot initiatives, like what we talked about earlier, that tells you that Coloradans want public safety. They want a strong public safety presence. And the only thing holding us back from that is people not paying attention to what's happening in Denver at the legislature, and then reflecting their values and their desires in the way that they're voting for these things.
Wonderful. Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time. I know it was quite short, but we really
Yeah,
appreciate your input, and thank you very much for your service.
thank you so much. Like I said, I always appreciate coming on and getting the opportunity to chat with you, and we'll do this again soon, hopefully.
Sounds good. Thanks so
All right.
much.
Thank you for listening to the Engage the Rockies podcast, your go-to podcast for local and state issues concerning Colorado.